If you want to learn about transitions and animations, then welcome to the tutorial. Alright, so there was my intro. I hope you liked it because it took me like 8 hours to make that sick beat. So yeah, transitions, aka we're going to learn how to move crap across the screen basically, and later on, aside from like basic animations, I'm going to be showing you guys something called scene transitions, which you can pretty much take an entire scene and switch it for the user, and it kind of plays into what we're going to learn later on. Pretty much these thing called intents, and it's pretty much how you change entire views for the user. But anyways, I'm kind of overwhelming you guys, I know it already. Way to go, Bucky, way to go. So let's go ahead and get started with a new project here, and I'm just gonna name this tranny. It's just short for transitions, so I'm just gonna hit next right there. And another thing I want to point out, make sure that you're using API 19 for the minimum, because even though it's not going to target all of the devices for this tutorial, we're going to be using some libraries and, well, just compatible that way. So again, 19, unlike before when we were just using Froyo. Let's move up to KitKat. By the way, kind of ironic, Christmas was 3 days ago and my grandma got me a huge bag of Kit Kats. So, what do you guys care about that? What am I even talking about? Anyways, so let's go ahead and choose blank activity, next, and that's good right there. Doesn't really matter what you name it. Alright, so our interface is looking sweet. Let's go ahead and change this app theme to anything else. Let's do material dark. Let's switch it up a little bit. I forgot I named it tranny. How did I forget that? It was like 2 seconds ago. It gets me every time, aka one time. Alright, so what I'm going to do first is I'm going to delete this text view because, as you know, I hate it. And I'm going to drag a button here. Ooh, this one looks good. So drag that bad boy right there. And what this tutorial is going to do is it's going to essentially add a really basic animation to this button, transition, whatever you want to call it. It's going to take this button and we're going to move it in the bottom right hand corner, and I'll also grow it by a little bit, or enlarge it, I guess you might want to say. And this is going to happen whenever the user touches anywhere on the screen. So pretty basic demonstration. User taps the screen, button moves to the bottom right corner, boom, roasted. So I know you guys are thinking, like, but Bucky, shouldn't you give these things ID so we can reference them in the Java code? Oh, you silly old Englishman. Yes, I should. So the first thing I want to do is give this relative layout, which is pretty much your entire screen, an ID, because we're going to be tapping that and we need to listen for taps. So ID, by the way, this screen, I tapped that. These jokes, they keep getting worse. Alright, so anyways, one second, let me just laugh at my own joke a little bit more, and done. Alright, so I'll just name it Bucky's layout. That was a good joke though. That was good. And for this button, I am just going to name this Bucky's button. Should name it Bucky's butt, but that's a little bit immature if you ask me. So now we have a very basic interface, a layout and a button, and they both have IDs. And you know what, I'm not even going to fix this because don't give a F about the string resource. I'm just feeling like that today. So now that we got that taken care of, hop over to your Java code and let's start importing everything we need. The first thing is view.motion event, endpoint Android view.view, import. What did I do wrong? I always write in prot Android view group. There you have view group. Import Android widget, and of course we need to reference the relative layout. Alright, so now that all this nonsense is taken care of, let's go ahead and get to the good stuff. the first thing I want to do is I want to get a reference to my entire layout, and it was named Bucky's layout. And this is of course because before we can move the button, what we want to do is just wait and see whenever the user taps the screen. So therefore, that's why we need of course, we did this before, just a reference to this layout. And once we have that, we can hop down to on create, and below set content view, let's set up a listener. So Bucky's layout, set this equal to view group. Alright, so view group, find view by ID, and let's go ahead and find our layout, r.id, Bucky's layout. So on this layout, what I'm going to do is I'm going to set on TouchListener and new relative layout on TouchListener, and within here we have to implement the method public boolean on touch. So this is essentially going to wait to see whenever the user taps that layout, and whenever they do, it's going to call this method right in here. Now within this method, we're going to be writing quite a bit of code. It's actually not quite a bit, it's like 10 lines maybe, but the code's going to be responsible for moving this button. Now since this is already getting pretty cluttered and it's like way indented, what I'm going to do is I'm going to send this over to a new method called new button, or excuse me, move button, and we're going to be making this right below there. But before we do, make sure to return true to let your app know that, okay, we handled that touch event. So now, just for the sake of cleaning everything up, let's go ahead and make that, hold on a second, itching my eye, and now I'm itching my nose. Okay, now I'm done. Alright, so public void movie button. That'll be interesting. Alright, move button. And of course, to move the button, you probably need a reference to the button. So view Bucky's button, and set it equal to find view by ID, r.id.Bucky's button. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to be breaking this transition up into two steps. The first step is just positioning the button. We'll put it in the bottom right corner. Now the second step is changing the button's size. So it's going to move to the bottom right, and it's also going to grow simultaneously. So let me just add some comments. Change the position of the button, and we're going to change the size of the button after that. Now even though we do it after, it's all going to appear to the user like it's happening at the same time. So in order to change the position of the button, what we're actually going to do is we're going to go to relative layout, layout params, and position rules. And this is actually going to be a really long line of code because you need to add this stupid thing like all the time. Alright. So new relative layout, layout params, and inside here, relative layout, layout params, wrap content. And let me just do this. You actually pass this in twice. I'll explain what it means in just a second. Alright, so just so you guys can see what's going on. So this right here is pretty much the rules on how we want to position items within that layout. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to wrap everything up. So it's pretty much just a nice tight package. And now with that package, the first thing I want to do is I want to add a rule to it. What do you want to do? Well, relative layout, align parent bottom, relative layout, yada yada, true. And by the way, this is going to make a lot more sense if you just pretend like this relative layout word is not there at all. So for example, you're just wrapping the content and you're aligning it on the bottom. So pretty much you're wrapping up the button and sticking it on the bottom. Now another thing I want to do is just real quick add it to the right as well. So align parent right. So all this code is going to do again is it's going to take the contents of this layout and stick it on the bottom right, aka position the button right here. Pretty simple, but they made us type this 600 times because they thought it was funny, so, you know, you got us that time. So after we make all those rules, what we have to do is we actually take that button and set layout params to position rules. Simple enough. So the only other thing I have to do after this is change the size of the button. Now the reason that we can't do it right here is because these are the parameters for the layout itself. Now what we actually need to do for the button is put view group layout params, there I go, and I'm just going to name this size rules since this was going to be responsible for changing the size. So for Bucky's button, there's a function called get layout params, and what this does is pretty much just gets information about whatever you call it on. It's essentially returning information about the button itself. So now one of the pieces of information is of course the width. So now we can access it through size rules and set it equal to like 450. I think that'll look pretty good. And also let's change the height. So size rules, height, set this equal to, why not 300? Sounds good. Now of course, just like before, you need to take Bucky's button, set layout params, which pretty much mean use these rules. What rules do we want to use? Well, just the size rules. So essentially we made some rules on how we should position it, set those rules, made some rules on the size of it, and set those ones as well. So now let's go ahead and, you know what, I forgot to start my stupid emulator, so let me pause this and start up. Alright, so here we have it. Let me go ahead and tap the screen, and our button moves to the bottom right. It grows, and see, that's weird. See, I thought what was going to happen is we were going to have a nice smooth animation instead of it just instantly hopping from the top left to the bottom right. Well, lucky for you, to do this it takes like 2 seconds. So if you ever want to just use a simple transition to either move it around or change something instantly, that's what you do. However, making a nice smooth animation is probably the easiest thing you ever learn. So let me go ahead and hide this, and the first thing we need to do is we need to import one more thing, Android.transition manager, and then after this what we want to do is we want to scroll all the way down to move button, and we're going to add one more line of code, and that's this transition manager, which is the package that we just imported, begin delayed transition, and we're just going to pass in Bucky's layout. Now this is pretty much going to give us the default transition, and let me just run this real quick. Now again, what we can do is we can add some more parameters to give us some more control over our animation. What this is going to do is it's essentially going to take your layout and look at the very first state of it, which is the default one that looks just like this, and the ending state, which is going to be the button in the bottom right, and it's going to just guess what transition you want. In other words, it's going to use the default animation of sliding the button down and growing it. However, if you ever want some more control over the details of our animation, then I'm going to show you guys how to do that in the next couple tutorials. But for right now, this default transition will be fine. So once this bad boy loads up, let me just click it right here, and as you can see, it now slides down in the bottom right instead of just hopping instantly. So there you go. There is your very basic tutorial on how to make transitions and animations. Again, in the next tutorial, what I'm going to be doing is I'm going to be showing you guys how to have a little bit more control over the specifics of your animations. So thank you guys for watching, and I'll see you next time. Alrighty guys, welcome back to another video, and in this tutorial I'm going to start teaching you guys about something called intents. Now an intent is essentially how you can have one activity launch another activity. In other words, what I'm trying to say is it's how you can have your app switch screens. Because most of the apps you design, it's going to be more than one screen or more than one activity, and the way you switch between them is called an intent. And there are different types of intents, but I'll cover everything in just a few tutorials. So for this application name, I'll name it like intent example. Why not do that? So intent example, next, and I'm switching back to API 8. Make sure we have all the devices covered, since this is actually one of the core things that you need every single phone to be compatible with it. And we'll just start with a blank activity, but of course we're eventually going to be creating another one, because that's the point of this tutorial, to learn how to transition between the two. So click next, and I'm going to make one activity named apples, and I'm going to make another activity named bacon, and we're going to be switching between the two. So I kind of like naming that because A and B, I don't know, it's kind of easy. It's better than just naming something A. Alright, so I'm going to name the first one apples and finish this up. Alright, very nice, very nice. Alright, so the first thing I want to do is get rid of that text view, and actually go ahead and select your relative layout, and let's make sure that this screen looks a lot different than the bacon screen. So I will say that this is a green apple, so I'm going to change the background of my relative layout to 009900. Make sure you have that pound sign in front of it and hit enter. I actually like this color green. I use it on my website a lot. So we'll say that this is the green apple activity, and just so we are clear, drag a large text out front there and just set the text of this to apples and hit enter. Now of course we need something that the user can do to say, okay, whenever I do this, I'm going to switch to another activity. And for this, we might as well just use a real quick button, because it's the easiest thing to do. Let me just position this stuff a little bit prettier. Alright, so this button will change the text of it to go to bacon. Alright, and actually let me get rid of this extra crap so we have some more room. Alright, so now what I should probably do is change the IDs of this. Alright, so the ID of this can just be like apples text. And the button, we'll just give it an ID of apples button. So pretty simple. We made a real quick activity, just has some text saying what activity we're on, and eventually whenever we click this, what's going to happen is the user is going to switch activities. However, for that to be possible, we actually need to hop over to our source code view, and instead of just going in our class and making a huge big listener, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to add one more element to this, or one more attribute to this button element. So if I go to Android, on click, then remember you can write something on here like on click, and then you just make an on click method right here, and you don't have to make a listener or anything like that. So now we can just make this method eventually and easily listen for button clicks. I don't know, it's like the really lazy way, but it works. So this activity is looking good right now. So let's go ahead and make that bacon activity, and if you want you can fix your little string resource little warnings, but I'm not really worried about it. Alright, so now we need a bacon activity. So in order to do that, remember, just go to your Java folder right here, and in that main package where your apples Java file is, just right click it and select new activity blank activity, pretty much adding another activity to our project. So I'm just going to name this one bacon, and make sure that you don't have the launcher activity selected, because remember our apples one is the very first one that we want to appear. This is just going to be an extra one. So hit finish, and let me organize everything. Alright, so now we have the apples Java, bacon Java, apples activity already designed. Now let's go ahead and design the bacon activity. So delete that text view right there, and for the background of bacon, I happen to know that the color of bacon is 72231F. So that, ladies and gentlemen, is the color of bacon. This is actually the first thing I learned about computers. Before I even learned to turn on my computer, I learned the hex color of bacon. So now you do too. Alright, so let's drag just some text on the screen, and let's change this text to bacon, just so we know what activity we're on, in case, I don't know, maybe someone's colorblind or something. Now, just so I don't forget, I'm going to change the ID to bacon text. And of course, what we can do is we can add a button as well. Plop that baby in the center and change the ID to bacon button. And let me change the text for that button too. Actually, I'll just leave it the same, since I'm going to be teaching you guys how to click this button and open up the bacon activity, and it's going to be the same. You can click this button and go back, but once you guys know how to do one, I'm not going to reteach the same thing over and over again. So, alright, now that we got that taken care of, what we can do is, just so you guys don't forget, is let me go to my Apple design source code, or the XML file, and I'm just going to add that on click to that bacon button too. And that's just so if you guys ever want to be able to click this and switch back, you can. Alright, so looking good. We have two activities. Switch those both to design view. Make sure you have an ID, Apple text and Apple button, bacon text and bacon button, and once you have your designs ready, you're ready to start writing code. Alright, so now all we have to do is we need to write a little bit of code. It only takes like 5 lines to say whenever you click this button, go to this activity. So hop over in your apples.java file, and we need to import two quick things. Import Android. Did I spell import right? Oh, I did for once actually. Content.intent, and that's so you can actually use intents. And of course, import Android.view.view. Tighten this up a little bit, and of course, remember, since all we did is we created this onClick attribute on the button in the XML file, we don't need to add any listener at all. We can just jump right down under onCreate and public void onClick. So again, this is the method that's going to be called whenever the user clicks the button. Simple enough, easy weasy cheesy. Alright, so the first thing we need to do is, actually let me type this first. So intent new intent this bacon class. Alright, so the first thing we need to do is we need to create an instance of the intent class. And this is just the way that Android switches between activities. So in order to do that, it's just like creating anything before, but the only parameter we have to look at is this is the activity that you want to launch. Of course, we only have one other one, the bacon class, so simple enough. So pretty much just set up an intent that pretty much says this is the activity we want to launch. Simple enough. And now the only other line of code is to launch it. And the method to do that is start activity, and this launches an activity, and now says, okay, well, what one do you want to launch? Well, we only made one, and it points to the bacon class, so just pass I in right there. So how easy is that? Now, if my emulator's, nope, not ready yet, so I'm going to wait a second. And actually, while that's booting up, I noticed that there's one more thing that I forgot, and that is we need to throw view through this onClick. Alright, now let me go ahead and run this, and here we are. So of course our apples activity is the first one that launches, and when I click go to bacon, hopefully, sweet, it goes to that bacon activity. And of course, if you ever want to go back and do the same thing, make a bacon, go back to apples, it's the same exact technique. I mean, I don't want to waste your guys' time and showing you guys the same thing over and over again. But what I do want to show you now is something else, and that is, what if we want to take a piece of data from the apples activity, and whenever we switch to the bacon activity, we want to send that data along. So what would be a real life example of this? Say that you had a messenger app, and of course all of your friends were in a list, and you also had another activity where you could write someone a message. Well, what you wanted to happen is you wanted to click on one of your friends, maybe their profile picture, and then it would say, okay, you're writing this friend a message. Or if you clicked on another friend, you would write that friend a message. So what you would need to do is you would actually need to pass some data along from one activity to another. And to accomplish this, it's actually really easy. So what I'm going to do is, if you go back to your apples activity right here, add one, let me get rid of this. Alright, so add just a plain text field right here, drag it anywhere on the screen, and I'm just going to set the width of this to like 250 dp so the user has something to type in, and we'll just run this example real quick. Well, first of all, let me give this an ID. Alright, so I'll name this apples input, and we'll say that the user can type something in here, I don't know, maybe like a name of their friends or something, and what we're going to do is we're going to take that data and we're going to send it along to bacon, and then we'll just print out whatever they typed right here. So again, a real quick example, but it'll teach you the basics of a very important concept. So again, make sure you have an input so we can get some data from the user and name it apples input. So now hop back over to your apples.java class and import android.widget.editText, and that was of course that input field. Alright, so scroll down to onClick, and now what we want to do between these two little lines of code is essentially get the text from that input. So final edit text, I'll just name it apples input. Remember, I like naming my Java variables the same as whatever that ID was. So now of course edit text, find v by id, r.id.apples input. So now this is just a reference to that input field. So now what we want to do is actually get the data, or get whatever text they typed into it. So string, I'll just say that, I don't know, it's user message, and set this equal to apples input dot get text dot to string. So that's going to take anything they typed in, convert it to a string, and store it in this user message variable. So now that we got that taken care of, the only other thing we need to do is we need to figure out how we transfer it to bacon activity. And it's actually really easy. Anytime you have extra information that you want to pass along to another activity, you call the put extra method. Now the put extra method takes any extra information in the form of a key value pair. So the first parameter is, okay, what do you want to call this piece of information? And I'll just name it like apple message. Now the second part, of course, is what information do you want to pass along, and of course the user message. So eventually we're going to say, okay, switch to the bacon activity, and when you do, pass along the user message, whatever they typed in, and just so they can have the ability to print it out or whatever they want to do with it, we'll just reference it with the keyword apple message. So pretty sweet. So now that we're passing it along, we need to add the functionality in bacon.java to handle it. Now all bacon.java is going to do is it's going to pretty much take whatever message and set it as the text right here. Simple enough. So let's just go ahead and import android.widget.textView, because that's the only thing that we need to reference. And of course, it's going to allow us to reference that right there. Now the code for this, we can actually just stick on create, because this is a code whenever you create or launch this activity. So the very first thing I need to do is I need to allow this class the ability to accept extra information. And in order to do this, you actually just call bundle, and I'm just going to name it apples data. And the method for this is get intent, get extras. So essentially what you're doing is you're getting any extra information whenever you get launched from somewhere. So this is gonna call the intent, this is the extra information, and any extra information we're just gonna store in apples data. Simple enough. So now what we have to do is actually want to test something first. So we'll say if apples data equals null, in other words there's no data, I don't know, maybe this got launched from another activity, or maybe you don't have any data for a reason, maybe they just didn't type anything in, whatever, then what we want to do is we want to handle it appropriately, and we can just return. Because of course you don't want to try to change this text if there is no text to accept. So that takes care of it, make sure that we never get any errors or anything like that. However, if it gets passed through that test, that must mean that the user gave us some extra information. So the first thing I want to do is just store this in a variable. And what did I name that? Apple message. So I'm going to make a variable called apple message, and of course this is equal to apples data, get string, and the parameter that you need for here is that keyword. So again, this is the keyword or the key, but it's actually going to be equal to the value, which is whatever they typed in. Like, I love Bucky. That's something that a lot of people are probably going to type in because it's so awesome and I am the coolest dude in the world. I should just talk for like 10 minutes about how awesome I am. Oh, alright, rambling again. Alright, so the next thing I want to do is, of course, just get a reference to this text view and set it equal to our newly formed variable. Simple stuff here. So text view, and I'm in a bacon text, and set this equal to text view, find view by ID, r.id.bacon text. And of course you guys already know what all this does. Bacon text, if you ever want to change the text on something, you just call the method set text. And of course remember that apple message is essentially the string that the user typed in. Simple enough. So now let's go ahead and run this. Alright, now just let me type something randomly like Bucky is awesome. Go to bacon and check it out. What it did is it took that text and it passed it along, and a pretty cool app. So we got apples to bacon, Bucky is awesome, tomato tomato. So now we pretty much know the basics of intents, not only how to switch, let me get this out of the way, from one activity to another, but we also learn how to pass information along with it. Pretty stinking sweet. So there you go. Thank you guys for watching, and I will see you guys next time. Alright guys, welcome back, and in this tutorial I'm going to start talking to you about broadcast intents and broadcast receivers. Now, it's a little weird concept to understand at first, but essentially what a broadcast is when your app sends out a system-wide message, kind of like a radio broadcast. It doesn't really have any specific target, it's just sending out this really broad message. Now, the reason that this happens is because you can make other things called broadcast receivers, and whenever your broadcast receiver says, oh, look at that message is something I want, then you can make your app do whatever, I don't know, like whatever functionality you want. So what we're going to be doing in this example, I know it's kind of like hard just for me to like talk about it and explain it, but in this example what we're going to be doing is we're going to be making two entirely different Android projects, and these projects are going to essentially communicate with one another. So how cool is that? Before, of course, we could do things with different classes and stuff, but never before have we created two entirely different projects and have them be able to communicate with each other. So go ahead and start a brand new project. This is going to be our first one, and I'm going to name this one send broadcast. So one of the projects is going to act like that radio tower. It's going to be responsible for just sending out that system-wide broadcast. And their other project is going to be like, hey, I actually want to do something whenever I got that message, so, that's what's going on. So, click next. That looks good right there. Next. And we want to set this one as a blank activity. Sweet. Alright, so for the activity name, we can just leave it as main activity right now. It doesn't really matter. Alright, so here is our very first activity and our very first project. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to add one button to this screen, and whenever we click it, it's going to send out that broadcast to the entire phone, to anything that's listening for it. And in another project, we're going to set up it's something called a broadcast receiver. It essentially is just going to listen for this specific broadcast, and then we'll just, I don't know, like print out some text on the screen or something. So the first thing I want to do is just add a button, and I'll change the text of this button to send broadcast. I also want to change the ID of this to send button, and the last thing I want to do is I want to add a real quick on click function, and this function we'll just call it send out broadcast, not broadcast, broadcast. Alright, so 3 attributes, and again this is an alternate way to essentially add this right here. So again, whenever we click it, it's going to call this method send out broadcast. In this method, it isn't included. We're going to have to write this in just a second, but essentially, like I said, what it's going to do is it's going to send out a system-wide broadcast to your entire phone. Whatever's listening can perform some kind of action. So now let's hop over to our main activity, and let's just go ahead and import all the stuff we need to import. So android.content.intent, and I spelled Android wrong, so make sure you don't do that. And of course, import android.view.view. Alright, so the only thing that we need to do here is we need to build one method. And that method is send out broadcast, because that's the only thing that this activity and this project essentially is going to do. So public void send out broadcast view. So the first thing we need to do is we just need to make an intent. So intent I instead of equal to new intent. Now remember before I said whenever you make an intent, generally what you do is you put some kind of class in here, and then it looks for that class. For example, remember we had that baking class in the last tutorial, and it just pops it up into a new screen. However, this is a special kind of intent because it doesn't have an explicit class or another screen that it's going to call. It's just going to kind of broadcast a weird message to anyone that's listening, so that's why we don't need to throw a class right in there. So after this, what we need to do is take that intent and call a method on it called setAction. Now for right now, just copy this package name right here and throw it in here as a string. Now the reason that we need to set action on all of our broadcast intents is this. Say that you have a bunch of different programs on your phone and they're all sending out these broadcasts. Well, maybe we want to make a program later on, but it only wants to listen for broadcasts from this application. So again, if we have like 100 different, or not 100, that's unrealistic. If we have like 10 different apps and they're all sending out broadcasts, well, we don't want to listen for all of those. We only want to listen for this broadcast, for this intent. So the set action is essentially a keyword that, I don't know, it's like, this is the keyword for this broadcast. That's essentially what it does. So another thing that I want to do real quick is something called add flags, and intent flag include stopped packages. Now you don't really need to memorize this, just make sure you have it in there every time. It's just because they changed the Android operating system, and just to make sure that this intent broadcast is compatible with all versions of Android, you need to have this. So, that's kind of their fault. Nothing that we did. So, the last thing, of course, in order to send that broadcast, you just send it out just like that. So now, as soon as we click this button, what's going to happen is it's going to call send out broadcast. And what send out broadcast does is it's just going to say, okay, I'm sending out this broadcast. Can anyone hear me? This broadcast is going out to the universe. I'm sending it out. So of course, that's what it does. In the next tutorial, what we're going to be doing is we're going to be setting up something called a receiver in a brand new project, and it's going to accept this or wait for this to happen, and then we'll just make something cool happen whenever it occurs. Alrighty, Hosses, so that is actually all we need to do for this project. So the next thing I want you to do is go to File, New Project, and we're going to be making, like I said, an entirely different app for the broadcast listener or receiver. So I'm just going to name it, what was my last one? Send broadcast, receive broadcast, and that's good. That's good. Now another thing I want to do is I'm just going to choose add no activity. So again, this is just going to be a listener, so we don't really need a screen for it, and click finish. Alright, so we don't have an interface or any design, but of course we still need somewhere to write some code. So expand project and expand app, Java, and in this first top package right here, remember that's where we put all of our Java files. So right click it and choose new other broadcast receiver. Since that's all this is, it's a program that receives broadcasts. Simple enough. Now for the class name, I'm just going to name it receive broadcast, and make sure that both of these are checked by default and click finish. So what it does is it builds us pretty much a generic class to receive broadcasts. So eventually we're going to be listening for these broadcasts, and whenever one occurs and we actually accept it, what do we want to happen? Well, all I'm going to have happen is we're just going to print out a little message on the screen. It's kind of like a quick little notification or a pop-up. You may be familiar with them. You'll see whenever we do it. But in order to do that, we actually need to import android.widget toast. And this imports a piece of toast. So if you open up your CD drive in your computer right now, you're going to see a piece of toast in there. Alright, I'm just kidding. This is for the pop-up. Now, like I said, this onReceive method is going to be called whenever we receive that broadcast, that specific broadcast that we're listening for. So what do we want to happen whenever that message gets sent out and we listen for it and hear it? Well, all I'm going to do is make a little pop-up appear on the screen. So it's toast make text, which pretty much means make pop-up, and the parameters, 3 parameters we got to pass in. The first thing we have to do is pass through this context. The second one is the string that you want to appear pretty much for your pop-up, and I'll just write like broadcast has been received. Alright, now the third one, just write toast length long, and this is the duration of how long you want the pop-up to appear for. So it's either, you have 2 options, long and short, so we'll just make sure it appears on the screen for like, I don't know the duration of this, it's not long, it's only like 5 seconds maybe. So alright, this looks pretty good right here, and this is actually the only thing you have to do for whenever you create a receiver to receive broadcast messages. Now of course, how does this know to listen for this specific broadcast? Because this was our original broadcast that we created, and remember I told you guys there may be a bunch of different broadcasts going on in your phone, a bunch of different things sending them out. In order to identify each one, we gave it essentially a keyword. So this is the keyword that gets tied to this specific broadcast whenever the user clicks the button. So in your other project, we somehow need to say listen for broadcasts with this keyword. Now in order to do that, we actually go up to the manifest file and click Android manifest XML. Now, of course, this is the manager. I say of course a lot. It's kind of annoying, probably. So, alright, so this is the receiver and where we can manage everything. Now, what we need to do is we need to add something called an intent filter. This is pretty much going to say, don't just listen for any broadcast. We need to filter out these broadcasts to only listen for specific ones. Now, inside here is where you write which type of broadcasts you want to listen for. So if you write action, an Android name, then what you can do is you can paste your keyword in there. So now this program is only listening for broadcast intents with this keyword, aka the only one that we did. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is it. We set up our broadcast receiver, and whenever it receives a broadcast with this keyword, it's going to call on receive, aka make something pop up on the screen. So the first thing we have to do is we need to run this. And whenever we run this, check it out. I don't know if you guys can see, but one thing I want to make sure you guys do is click launch default activity. You see how this is default? Well, we don't want to launch this at all because this is just a listener. It doesn't have any screen associated with it or anything like that. So we're going to click do not launch activity and then click run. And what's going to happen is in our emulator, you're not going to have like before whenever you tested an app and an activity popped up and then you can click something. That's not going to happen because whenever you run this, all it does is it starts listening for that broadcast to occur. So now if we go to our other project, send broadcast, then we can run this project, and this is just for the other one. Alright, so now we got that listener. So again, go to your other project, the one that could send out a broadcast, and just run this bad boy too. Now whenever we click send broadcast, nothing happens because why are you not? Oh, it is because I am a moron and alright, I essentially made a toast, which is that pop-up, but I forgot to actually show it on the screen. So let's try this again. Alright, so hopefully whenever we click send broadcast, check it out. This is that little toast I was talking about. Broadcast has been received. So there you go. And take note of this. Remember, first of all, remember to include your show method. But check this out. The program to send a broadcast is this, and the program that prints out that little message is an entirely different system. It's this broadcast receiver, and this is that little message. So how sweet is that, that we're pretty much communicating between apps, between different programs within our phone. Alright, Hosses, in this video, what I'm going to do is I'm going to start talking about Android threads. Now, as you guys know, threads not only can help speed up the performance of your app, but they're going to be used in a lot of different things in, concerning Android development later on. So it's a pretty important concept. And I'm sure that everyone already knows about threads from my Java tutorials, but just a real quick explanation. As you guys know, computer programs, they run from the top down. And they run pretty much in a nice order, A, then B, then C. You give it a list of instructions and it does whatever you say. Now the only problem with that is, say that you have 3 instructions, A, B, and C. And B, that middle instruction is, I don't know, maybe the user clicks a button and your app is going to perform some weird long calculation. Well, since your program is performing in a nice order, A, B, and C, that means that C has to wait for B to get done. So if the user clicks a button and it's making some calculation, then your app is going to appear to be frozen and the user isn't going to be able to move anything around or switch activities or click anything until it's done. And what's going to happen then, they're probably going to get ticked off, close out of your app, rate at a 1 on Google Play, your app career is going to be destroyed, and you're just going to have a bad day. So that is why we're learning about threads, because I do not want your life to be destroyed. Alright, so what I did is I created a brand new project and I just chose all the defaults, blank activity, nothing weird or anything like that. So this is where I am right now. So the first thing I want to do is get rid of this text view, and I'm going to drag a large text in the middle of the screen. And what can I write? Actually, let me drag a button too. So essentially what this program is going to do is we're going to click this button, and first I'm going to show you guys what happens when you don't have threads. It's essentially going to try to make some calculation, freeze up, and pretty much I'm going to be breaking the app on purpose. And then I'm going to be showing you guys when you use threads how awesome it is. So for this button, we'll just write something stupid like click me. We'll say touch me. That's a little bit more perverted. Maybe touch me baby. There we go. So touch me baby, and this text, we could say hello. Not that perverted, but whatever. Alright, so for this text view, just give it an ID, and I'll just name it Bucky's text. And for the same thing for the button, I'm just going to give this an ID of Bucky's button. Alright, now the last thing I want to do is for this button, make sure you have it selected, and go down to on click, and I'll just write something like, we're going to call a method called click Bucky's button. So that way we don't have to set up a listener or anything weird like that. And of course, if you want, you can take care of your string resources right there, but I'm not really worried about it, aka I am lazy. So hop over to your code right here, and the first thing that we're going to do is we're just going to create this program without using any threads at all, the improper way. So another thing is make sure that you have your emulator started, boot that bad boy up. And okay, let's go ahead and import android.view.view and import android.widget.textView. So actually, how can I do this? Alright, now under here, let's go ahead and implement that method whenever you click the button. So public void, what was it, like click Bucky's button, I believe. Throw your views in there, and the first thing I'm going to do is, this is going to be the dumbest program ever, because we're just going to have a button in the middle of the screen, and again, this is for performing large calculations, but I really don't want to make any worthless calculations. So all I'm going to do to take up a bunch of time is I'm just going to have the system wait, pretty much just wait and do nothing for a certain period of time, and this is just going to simulate, I don't know, maybe like going to a database and gathering some data, or maybe figuring out some high score or something, or any calculation that takes a considerable amount of time. It's what it's going to simulate. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to get 10 seconds into the future. So if you just make a variable called future time, you can do this by going system.current_time, and this of course is the time right now. Well, not right now, whenever you run it, it's going to get the current time, and we're just going to add 10,000 to it. Now this is 10,000 milliseconds, so that means that future time, whenever this program runs, is going to be 10 seconds in the future. So now we're just going to make a real quick while loop, and we'll say while system dot current time milliseconds is less than future time. What do we want to do? Well, the first thing we're going to do is called synchronized, and I don't know if I taught you guys about this synchronized keyword in my Java tutorials. I made those like a few years ago, but what synchronized essentially does is it prevents multiple threads from bumping into each other or essentially trying to do the same thing. It I don't know, kind of synchronizes it. It's a pretty good keyword. Actually, I think I did teach this because I remember it, but again, we don't really need this for right now since we're not using threads, but later on we're gonna have it, so I figured I just might as well write it right now. Now inside here, we're just gonna have the easiest try block ever. And check this out. All we're gonna do is wait, and we're gonna stick future time minus system current time milliseconds, and it's giving us an error because we didn't catch anything. So we'll just catch an exception and we won't do anything with it because I really don't care. Alright, so all this code does right here essentially is it just waits 10 seconds. And if your emulator is running a little slower or something, you can change the time of it right here, but 10,000 means 10 seconds. So again, this would obviously be some kind of calculation. You would never want to write this actual code in your app just to wait and do nothing, but for simulating some kind of calculation or background process, it's perfect. So after 10 seconds, after the user clicks the button and waits 10 seconds, what we can do is we can just change this text field right here. So text view, Bucky's text, set equal to text view r.id.bucky's text. And of course, once we have a reference to that text field, we can just change the text on it using set text. And I'll just write like nice job Haas whenever they click the button. So now let's go ahead and run this bad boy. And again, this is what's going to happen. Let me get this started first. So the user is going to click the button and they won't be able to do anything for 10 seconds because it's trying to perform this bit of code first. That means that the button's going to be frozen. They aren't going to be able to switch activities. Nothing is going to be allowed for the user to do. Oh, that's nice, mate. Look at this app I just got. It's this app, and you touch this button, mate, and it changes the text right there. I mean, this technology is incredible. So let me just touch this button, and oh, it looks like it's frozen, and it ain't letting me do anything, mate. I'm just waiting here for 10 seconds, and oh, I can't click it again or do. Oh, well, there we go. Well, that was kind of a pain. So I guess I'm installing that, rating it 1 star on the App Store, and whoever developed it is probably going to be fired from their job. Oh, now we got this thing. Oh, MG. Alright, so this is another problem you got whenever your app's making a long calculation in the background. It says it isn't responding. Do you want to close it? You know what? This app sucks completely. It takes too long. It freezes up. So what we're going to do is, if you want to learn how to fix all of these issues, then watch the next tutorial where we are going to be taking this program and making it work beautifully. Alright guys, so in order to make this app more efficient, what we're going to be doing is this. We're going to be taking this bit of code, which again, remember, simulates some long calculation, and we're going to say, okay, take this bit of code, and instead of just running it on the main thread, on the main program, go ahead and stick it inside another thread and do it in the background. So take this, go off somewhere else, perform your calculation, and leave the main program to go about its business. So that's all the thread is. So let's go ahead and learn how to do that right now. And let me give myself some space to work with. Alright, so essentially, remember, I really don't know like if everyone knows about threads or not, but what you do is you create something called runnable. Now this runnable object, inside here you can stick code that you're going to put inside a thread. So of course, let me just type this first, probably be easier. Runnable, there we go. Alright, so as you can see, it auto completed, and make sure you have your semicolon at the end there. So whenever you make a runnable object or a runnable class, inside this run method is essentially what code do you want to stick inside your thread? What code is going to take a long time that you want to run in the background? Well, it's this bit of code right here, so I'm just going to cut it and paste it right in there. So now we have a bit of code that we can stick inside a thread. Again, you need to put it inside a runnable object, and that's just that's just how Java is set up. Now, another thing I want to point out is this. Make sure that you do not stick this bit of code inside any thread, any runnable object, or anything like that. The rule is, whenever you're making Android apps, you never want to change any interface element, update the interface at all within a thread. In order to update the interface or change the user's view, we need to make something called a handler, and I'm going to be showing you guys how to do that in just a second. But anyways, to finish this thread, up right here, again, we stuck all of our code inside runnable right here, and now we need to stick it inside a thread. So I'm just going to name my Bucky's thread, and you set it equal to new thread with your runnable code inside there. So again, you can actually have multiple threads with multiple bits of code, and whenever you call them, they can run all at the same time. So you can actually have 3 different ones right here, and it's actually depending on your computer or your device how many threads it can run at the same time. But essentially, you can have 4 different chunks of code all running at the same time instead of just top down one at a time like we learned before. So this creates a new thread, and the one last line of code you need to do is you just need to start it, and it essentially just starts performing this bit of code. So let me just cut this, and I'm gonna run this bad boy right now. Alright, so check out what's going on so far. So again, remember I cut that code to update the text right here, so the text isn't gonna update, but whenever we click the button, it's not freezing like before. It doesn't have to wait 10 seconds, even though inside this click Bucky's button, we have code to just wait 10 seconds. So it's not freezing up, it's allowing us to click it over and over and over again. Pretty stinking sweet. But of course, to complete this program, what we want to do is we want to allow it to update the interface, change this hello text to, what did I have on it, like nice job or something. So let's go back to our project, and let me just tighten all this up. I think it just looks better that way. Alright, so the first thing we want to do is we want to import android.os.handler and import android.os. Why do I keep writing os.message? There we go. So in order to update the interface, what we do is we create something called a handler. Now remember, I said the rule is whenever you want to update your interface, you can't do it within a thread. It's bad practice, and the reason you can't do that is because a thread is essentially something that you can have multiple things running of at once. So if you have a bunch of different stuff trying to update your interface, then it's gonna, well, first of all, it can crash your program. Second of all, it would just be stupid if one thing is trying to change this hello variable and another thing is at the same time. It's just bad programming practice, even if it doesn't crash your program. So what we're going to do is we're going to create a handler, and the handler, I'm just going to name my handler. You can name it anything you want. Set equal to new handler, and this is going to be chilling on your main thread. So again, this is pretty much part of your main program, and inside here we're just going to call alt insert to call a method. Here it is, handle message right there. So again, a handler is essentially just part of your threaded application that sits on your main thread, and it's responsible for updating the interface since those threads aren't allowed to. Simple enough. So delete this code right inside here, and I actually have that copied still, I think. Let's see what's on. Sweet. So inside here you can just put that code to update that bit of text right here. So now you're thinking, alright, well, how does it know when to call this handler and update this little bit of text? Well, we have to add one line of code, and that goes right here. Alright, so after your calculation is complete, what you can do is you can take that handler and call send empty message. Now I'll talk to you guys about sending messages to the handler later on, but essentially what this does is it just calls the handler. That's all you guys really need to know for now. That's how you use handlers. Again, you can take messages and pass them along, but whenever we create apps that do something other than you just click a button and wait for something to happen, then it's going to make a lot more sense. But for now, let's go ahead and run this, and everything should be working perfectly. Alright, so check it out. I'm going to click this button right now, click, and this text is still going to take 10 seconds to update because that's what we told it to do. But in the meantime, the app isn't frozen. I can still click this button, I can still use other parts of the app, and of course when it's done, the handler changes it perfectly. So that, ladies and gentlemen, is the benefits and the power of using a threaded application. Again, anytime you have any hard work to do, then just stick it inside a thread, and of course you can just use the handler to update the interface, and well, pretty stinking easy, and your apps are going to perform a lot better. So in the future tutorials, I'm going to be showing you guys some other cool stuff that you can do with threads, and you guys are going to be app developer pros in no time. So for now, thanks for watching, and well, see you later.